It was bound to happen. We were bound to get an episode that didn't quite hit the mark, and I have to say the Left Behind episode is that for me. Look, every season of television has its highs and lows. Fortunately for us, the low point really isn't that bad. What's going on YouTube? My name is Jay Lee and I like a lot of stuff. Today I'm talking about The Last of Us, episode 7. I love The Last of Us video game, so of course I've played the Left Behind side story on which this episode is based. I don't, however, know it as well as the main game, so most of this felt quite fresh to me despite knowing the eventual outcome of the episode. I have pretty mixed feelings about this one and foresee it being my lowest rated episode of the season. It's still very watchable and the unfolding details are actually quite important to Ellie as a character and how she navigates the current situation with Joel. By the way, I still get super uneasy when I talk spoilers, so again, I have to give a spoiler warning for this episode of The Last of Us. We pick up from last week's cliffhanger with Ellie desperately trying to help a very injured Joel. She's found an abandoned house to help shield him from the cold and maybe find a way to save him. The episode begins and ends here, but the point of this one is actually to explore Ellie's life before she met Joel. We're given a look at Ellie's life at the Fedra military school, and it's kind of a unique look at her backstory. I don't think the game gave the military faction much of a character, so this was entirely new to me. After Ellie gets in shit for fighting, she's confronted by a captain who tries to steer her down the right path. In doing so, he unknowingly drives an ideological wedge between Ellie and her friend Riley, who's run off to join the Fireflies. It's an interesting device to complicate an already complicated friendship, as we soon find out once the girls reconnect. And most of the episode is just the girls spending time together. It's meant to be one last hurrah and a bit of a send-off for Riley before she gets deployed to an outpost in Atlanta or wherever. But it inevitably goes sideways when a stray infected crashes their dance party. Look, I get why this episode exists. It's made abundantly clear when Ellie finally acts on her repressed emotions for Riley and asks her to stay. The audience needed to have that time with the two of them to experience Ellie's struggle with confessing her feelings to and for her best friend. That moment wouldn't have meant as much had Riley not created this perfect date for the two of them in the abandoned mall. Nevertheless, just because something is essential doesn't make it entertaining, and that's kind of how I felt about this episode. Obviously, I know the outcome and I'm kind of waiting for the course-altering moment to happen, but I was with Sam and Henry as well, and they still managed to make me care a lot about them in a single episode. Here, I was just kind of, okay, bored isn't the word I would choose to describe it, but kind of rolling my eyes a bit. None of it was cringy or vomit-inducing or anything, and I certainly don't have a better idea of how to have done it. Maybe it was the writing. I've praised the show so much for its beautiful writing up until now, and now that I think about it, this episode is probably my least memorable in terms of dialogue. Though I'm really glad they kept Riley's line,
"We could just be all poetic and shit and lose our minds together."
because it is kind of a perfect angsty teenager thing to say, but I didn't feel the same about the rest of their back and forths. I've listened to the official podcast and understand the gravity of why it all matters. Regardless, I hate to say it, but I just didn't find it all that interesting. And maybe that is because there's so much at stake in the main part of the story. I mean, Joel has a hole in his body, so taking this detour felt more disruptive than any previous time jump. I will say that both the show and the game do a great job juxtaposing the two timelines to drive home the lesson that Ellie learns from this. She does have an internal struggle with what to do when Joel instructs her to leave, go north, and find Tommy. The relevance of Riley telling her to fight and hang on to every last moment really gets amplified when it cuts to her deciding to go back to Joel, hold his hand as she did Riley's, and fight. Now, it kind of has to be said that the main game never felt incomplete without the Left Behind DLC. Some fans of the game didn't even play the expansion at all, and it still garnered the same reverence. It's certainly important in fleshing out Ellie's backstory, but as a departure from the main vein of the show, it does feel a bit like a tacked-on side quest. The ending definitely helps me feel more positive about this one, so I'm giving episode 7, Left Behind, a 7 out of 10. I don't catch all the Easter eggs in each episode, but this time around there were 3 standouts that made me smile. The keys on Captain Kwong's desk had a red paw on it, not unlike the logo of the development team behind the games. The Dawn of the Wolf poster that's inside the mall was featured in Sarah's bedroom in the game. And while the girls were playing on the escalator, or as Ellie calls them,
electric stairs?
Aha's Take On Me is playing in the background. Ellie plays this song on the guitar in part 2 of the game, so it's kind of nice to have that through line established in this season. Anyways, that's all from me this week. Come back soon to catch my thoughts on the last 2 episodes of The Last of Us, plus all the stuff I haven't talked about yet.